There's a moment that happens to a lot of people in their 40s, and it usually happens quietly. You're sitting somewhere ordinary, maybe at your kitchen table late at night, maybe scrolling through your banking app before bed, maybe standing in line at a grocery store looking at the total climbing higher and higher, and suddenly you realize something that feels uncomfortable. You're not broke, but you're not exactly comfortable either. You've been working for years, maybe decades. The paycheck comes in, bills go out, life keeps moving. Mortgage, car payment, kids' school expenses, groceries that somehow cost double what they did 5 years ago. And yet, when you really stop and look at the numbers, you feel this quiet question creeping into your mind. Is this it? Because if you're in your 40s, you start noticing something strange. Time feels different. When you were 25, 10 years sounded like forever. When you're 40, 10 years feels like it might pass in the blink of an eye. And that realization can be terrifying or incredibly powerful. Now here's the strange part. A lot of people hit their 40s and start doing the opposite of what actually helps them. They upgrade their life. Bigger house, newer car, more vacations, more spending, almost like they're trying to reward themselves for surviving adulthood. And look, I get it, honestly, I really do. But here's the uncomfortable truth. For many people, the biggest financial mistake of their life happens between the ages of 40 and 50, because this is the decade where your habits either quietly build freedom or quietly trap you for the next 30 years. And this is something I think about way too much. My name is Smith, and I spend an unusual amount of time thinking about money, financial psychology, and the strange ways people accidentally sabotage their future without even realizing it. Not because people are irresponsible, but because most people misunderstand what the 40s are actually for. And here's the surprising insight that most people don't hear often enough. If you're willing to live like you're a little broke in your 40s, you dramatically increase your chances of becoming genuinely wealthy in your 50s. Not flashy rich, but free, comfortable, calm. The kind of financial life where money stops being the background anxiety in your mind. So in this conversation, I want to walk you through something that might completely change how you think about this decade. Because your 40s are not just another chapter of life, they're the turning point. And if you approach them the right way, they can quietly set up the most financially peaceful years of your entire life. Section 1. The most dangerous decade for lifestyle inflation. Your 40s are a strange financial decade. On paper, they're usually the best earning years of your life. You've built experience, your career is more stable, your income is often higher than it's ever been. But something else happens at the same time. Your spending suddenly has the opportunity to explode. And I've seen this pattern over and over. Someone struggles through their 20s, barely making rent. Their 30s are a mix of progress and chaos, promotions, maybe a house, maybe kids. Then their 40s arrive, and finally it feels like things are stabilizing. So what happens? They upgrade everything. The car that served them well suddenly feels outdated. The house that once felt big now feels small. Vacations get fancier, and each individual decision feels harmless. But when you zoom out, something dangerous happens. Your lifestyle grows exactly as fast as your income. And that's where the trap begins. Because wealth isn't built by how much money you make, it's built by the gap between what you make and what you spend. That gap is everything. And the uncomfortable truth is that many people completely erase that gap during their 40s. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine two people. Both make $120,000 per year in their 40s. Person A spends $110,000. Person B spends $70,000. Both feel normal. Both live comfortable lives. But over 10 years, Person B builds an investment engine that can completely transform their future. Person A just maintains a lifestyle. And that difference compounds faster than most people realize, which leads us to something really interesting about living like you're broke, because it's not actually about deprivation, it's about control. Section 2. Living broke is actually strategic. When people hear the phrase, live like you're broke, They picture something extreme: no restaurants, no fun, no enjoyment. But that's not really what it means. Living broke in your 40s simply means this: you deliberately live below the life your income could technically support. And that small decision changes everything. Because when your income rises but your lifestyle stays relatively steady, something magical happens. Your savings rate explodes. Now here's where the psychology becomes fascinating. In your 20s, saving money feels slow, painfully slow. You save a few $100s and it barely moves the needle. But in your 40s, you suddenly have the power to save thousands of dollars per month if you control your spending. And when that money starts flowing into investments, retirement accounts, and assets, the compounding becomes very real. This is the decade where the snowball gets big enough to roll on its own, only if you give it fuel. And that fuel is the difference between your income and your lifestyle. Think of it like planting trees. If you plant trees in your 20s, they're still small by your 40s. But if you plant aggressively in your 40s, by your 50s, you suddenly have a forest. And that forest produces shade, fruit, and options. Options are the real definition of wealth. The option to slow down, the option to change careers, the option to retire earlier. But those options are quietly built by the sacrifices no one sees during your 40s. Section 4. The freedom multiplier of your 40s. Here's something people rarely talk about. Your 40s are the last decade where compound growth can still do something dramatic. Let's say someone invests aggressively from age 40 to 50. That money doesn't just grow for 10 years. It might grow for 20, 30, even 40 years. And that's where the math becomes almost unfair. Let me paint a picture. Imagine someone invests $3,000 per month starting at age 40. Over 10 years, that's $360,000 contributed. But if that money continues compounding until their late 60s, it could easily become over $1 million depending on returns. And the key moment that made that possible, their 40s. That decade is like the final launch window. Miss it, and catching up becomes very difficult. Use it wisely, and it can completely change your financial life. And the funny thing is, most of the time, the difference isn't income, it's restraint. It's saying no to things that would quietly steal your future freedom. Not forever, just long enough to build momentum. Section 5. The psychological advantage of temporary sacrifice. There's another interesting aspect to living broke in your 40s. It's temporary, and that matters more than people realize. If someone told you that you had to live extremely frugally forever, that would feel depressing. But if someone told you, spend 10 focused years building financial momentum and your 50s become dramatically easier, that feels different. Suddenly, it becomes a strategy, a season, a deliberate trade. And here's the beautiful part. By the time your 50s arrive, two powerful things happen. Your investments are much larger, and many of your biggest expenses start fading. Kids grow up, mortgages shrink, careers stabilize, which means the sacrifices you made earlier start paying you back in peace. Real peace. Not the kind that comes from buying something new, but the kind that comes from knowing you're not financially fragile anymore. Section 5. Why your future self will thank you. Try a small mental exercise. Picture yourself at 55. Not dramatically older, just a little further down the road. Now imagine two versions of that future. In the first version, your life looks comfortable on the outside, but financially it's still tight. You still depend heavily on every paycheck. Retirement feels uncertain. There's this quiet background anxiety about money. In the second version, something is different. Your investments have grown. Your monthly expenses are manageable. Your financial life feels stable. You have breathing room. The difference between those two futures is often decided in your 40s, and that's why this decade matters so much, because every decision you make during these years is quietly voting for one of those futures. And honestly, most people don't realize that at the time. They're just making small lifestyle choices. But small choices repeated for 10 years shape the rest of your financial life. Conclusion. If there's one idea I hope sticks with you from this conversation, it's this. Living like you're broke in your 40s is not about punishment. It's about positioning.
It's about recognizing that this decade holds an unusual kind of power. Your income is often near its peak, your experience is valuable, and time, while moving faster than it used to, still gives your investments enough runway to grow. But that window doesn't stay open forever, and that's why the decisions made during these years matter more than people realize. When you resist lifestyle inflation, when you keep your expenses controlled, when you invest aggressively instead of upgrading every part of your life, you're doing something incredibly powerful. You're buying freedom for your future self. Not flashy freedom, but the quiet kind. The kind where financial stress slowly fades into the background. The kind where your 50s don't feel like a countdown to retirement panic, but the beginning of a more stable chapter of life. And honestly, that's the type of wealth most people